All right. When I say that we've got the best guests and the hardest hitting opinions in the market, I mean it. Hey, it's Marky Billson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans. Name of the program, Tri-City Sports Now. You know what we do? We own the Tri-Cities because I got the best guests and the hardest hitting opinions in the market. And today, of course, it's Asian House Vols Talk with Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee. Vols are opening up on Saturday with Georgia State, and they are a huge question mark. And I thought there was some room for optimism. Maybe there still is. You know, Caleb's got them going 7-5. So I thought there was some room for optimism, but I got to tell you now, you know, with Thompson being suspended, but this whole depth chart thing, I'm going to talk about that to lead off. This depth chart thing it's got me, what are they trying to do here? I mean, this is not a good sign. So, then at 1 o'clock, you know, talk fantasy football. Every fantasy football player in the world now is, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now that I've drafted Andrew Luck and... Did you handcuff Jacoby Brissett? I mean, I guess that's the easy thing to do. I mean, he would probably be on the waiver wire and just pick him up. You know, that's the real, you know, snap, easy thing to do. However, what about college football? There's not a college football, fantasy football, is there? No. Well, yes. And I'm going to tell you how you can play, because this is obviously college football territory. I got a guy, wrote about him about 3 years ago, so down south, Joe DeSalvo, he comes in. Joe DeSalvo, and he's got a college football fantasy website. Yeah, college fantasy football website. I didn't say those words in the right order. Okay. College football fantasy website. Pretty, yeah. There you go. And so we'll be talking to him in the next hour. Tomorrow I got a big show. I got coming up Joe Rexrode, who was just named the top sports columnist in the state by the National Sports Media Association, NSMA. And we're going to talk about the Titans and possibly, you know, I mean, last year he wrote the famous, I would rather go to the Tennessee Vanderbilt football game because it should have more riding on it in terms of a bowl game and all this than, and he might have been right, yeah. And I think he said he would rather go to that than Auburn, Alabama. Well, there you go. That's also really liking minor bowl games, to tell you the truth. But then again, he was being Tennessean over, we don't give a damn about the whole state of Alabama, right? Okay, so you can't fault him for that, maybe. But then you've got, also tomorrow I get the mayor of Kingsport talking about potential new ballpark for the Mets, who need only one victory to clinch a playoff berth. What do you think about that? And we also will be talking to Jim Schaus, commissioner of the Southern Conference, previewing the football season coming up. It wasn't that good of a look that Samford lost to Youngstown State by 3 touchdowns. And so what's the state? I mean, you know, this sort of thing. A lot of people actually now talking about ETSU, and now that they're playing Appalachian State in that game that hasn't been played on the gridiron in 16 years, and they're starting to realize, oh my goodness, this is what dropping football did to ETSU. I mean, it's really hitting home. Because before, you know, okay, back in the old Southern Conference days, Appalachian State, sure, they, you know, won all the time. They're still in the same conference. I mean, come on. And now that Appalachian State has moved to the Sun Belt, and now that Appalachian State is hosting Miami and South Carolina and North Carolina, and now that Appalachian State is making more money on their money games and their bowl appearances, which are actually getting higher ratings than what the old FCS playoff is getting. When you look at all that, it is, oh my goodness. And although you still have geography between ETSU and ASU, and you still have, you know, basketball rivalry, baseball rivalry, I mean, they're both D1 still, ETSU and Appalachian State. Heck, Patrick Good transferring from Appalachian to ETSU. I mean, I would suggest ETSU is above Appalachians. I'll say this properly in a second. I would suggest that ETSU is above Appalachian State in the hierarchy of basketball. Football, though, you might as well be talking about ETSU and Milligan. Oh, sure, there's geography, but, this one has 85 scholarships. This one just got 63. This one takes Penn State and Tennessee to overtime. This one loses 59-3. Yeah. There you go. But I did want to talk about that depth chart. Yes, and we're going to talk to Caleb Calhoun, Asian House, all for Tennessee. What am I trying to say here? Asian House Vols talk with all for Tennessee's Caleb Calhoun. That's what I'm trying to have some difficulty spitting the words out today. Here we go. We've got that coming up at 12:30, and we definitely will talk about the depth chart because right now the Tennessee Volunteers supposedly know who 10 of their starters are going to be. If you go by the depth chart, Jeremy Pruitt, he's still in his honeymoon phase. Let's face it, he's still in a honeymoon phase. First team won more than one game than their predecessor did the previous year. Feeling is he's got the team on the right track because of that. 4-8. Well, his first team's 5-7. And this year, the Vols could go 7-5. Why, this year, if everything breaks for them, 8-4. Why, 6-6. I mean, you can't imagine. And the other thing that people like Jeremy Pruitt, he doesn't make too many dumb comments, right? I mean, he's not talking about 5-star hearts. He's not talking about, champions of life. He's not talking about what do we want from our media. He's not suggesting that he doesn't know how to count to 14. He's not allegedly calling Dre Bowles a traitor because a woman has just said that she's been raped, and although they were found not guilty in a court of law, she said that some of his teammates did it. So we like Jeremy Pruitt because of that. Hey, he comes from Alabama. Man, if only Tennessee could win like Alabama. I mean, a chip off the Nick Saban block. But the thing about Jeremy Pruitt is he doesn't make dumb comments, maybe, but he didn't make any comments at all. And that's beginning to be disturbing. And the case in point is the depth chart released prior to the Georgia State game. As I said, there are only 10 starters listed on it. We know that Jared Guarantano will be the quarterback. We know he'll hand off to Ty Chandler. We know Josh Palmer, Marquez Callaway, Juwan Jennings. Those will be the 3 receivers. We know very little else. And please, do not tell me there are 12 positions, starting positions, not to mention punter, on the depth chart where no position has been identified as having a starter. It's either this player or that one. Now, please do not give me, well, that's good coaching. Jeremy Pruitt is trying to keep the Panthers guessing. It's Georgia State. They were 2-10 last year. They're from the Sun Belt Conference. If you've got to rely on lineup deception to beat the Georgia State Panthers in Neyland Stadium in the first game of the 2019 season, it's going to be a long, long, long season for the Tennessee Volunteers. And furthermore, by not identifying these starters, you know what? It really does suggest that the player doesn't have all that much talent. It's actually insulting to him. I'll give you an example. Center. You'd be shocked if the starting center, 1st and 10, first series on offense for Tennessee against Georgia State, you'd be shocked if it wasn't Brandon Kennedy hiking a ball. You remember him. Alabama transfer, all that, Alabama was trying to prevent him from transferring in the conference, and I thought that was absolutely, absolutely, what should I say? I mean, they're trying to make Kennedy into a slave, basically. Well, you can transfer there, but you can't transfer here. And I mentioned, how do you know that Brandon Kennedy won't, let's say, throw some great block against Mississippi State this year that leads the Vols to victory? And as a result, it gives Alabama the Western Division crown. I mean, it could happen, And that's very, consider that. I've always said this. Brandon Stewart deserves an assist in the 1998 National Championship season. He transfers to Texas A&M, and in the Big 12 title game, he beats Kansas State, who would have otherwise played with a full boat against Tennessee. 2 years later in a Cotton Bowl, K-State beats Tennessee. Got to be happy the way things worked out. You didn't want to have to play Kansas State that year for the national title, trust me. You're much better off with a team having to play a backup quarterback. But there you go. If Brandon Kennedy isn't the starting center this year, if it's actually Jerome Carvin, you're actually right now telling me that Brandon Kennedy has a legitimate potential to be a really huge bust. That's not fair to him. And, no player, by the way, there's one defensive line position where they list 4 players could potentially start, including Aubrey Solomon, who's not right now eligible to play. Now, maybe he will be by game time. Nobody seems to know. It is very unfair from the NCAA. I mean, there needs to be a commissioner here that'll, but all right. Now, that makes sense if the NCAA grants him a waiver. But he's not really eligible, and they're saying, well, we're listing him as a starter. What does it say about the other 3 players that are listed at that position? Don't they deserve to know where they stand? Right now, there are 4 defensive linemen who, if this depth chart is to be believed, don't know if they're first string or fourth string. 5 days before the season begins. There isn't a single lineman except for tight end Dominic Wood-Anderson who has a starting position all sewn up. Perhaps it's telling freshman left tackle Wanda Morris is listed first, with the possibility that Jameer Johnson could start. A lot of people have talked about Wanda Morris. Gotta love a lineman named Wanda, right? I mean, Wanda is now a unisex name. I mean, Over right tackle, it's junior Marcus Tatum, and he's not listed as a starter definitely. It's listed as Marcus Tatum or Darnell Wright, who's another promising freshman, and there was the thought that, okay, there'd be these promising bookend tackles of Wright and Morris for 4 years at Tennessee. Well, or, as long as they decide to play college football. Well, that could still happen, certainly, but right now, the depth chart says, and I'm thinking that this might indicate something here, Marcus Tatum or Darnell Wright. But basically, when you don't list 12 positions as having a solid starter, it makes Pruitt look indecisive. And if the players don't know where they stand right now, it's likely they may never. And that is not a good thing. Now, if the players do know this, and this is gamesmanship, it really does show contempt for the fans and the media covering the program, because you're not being straight up for them. And it's not like, I don't think that not being straight up is going to help you against Alabama or Florida. It certainly isn't going to help you against Georgia State. I know that a last-minute lineup change can always happen, but if the entire offensive and defensive line is going to be decided on the last minute, something's really wrong with the 2019 Tennessee Volunteers and Jeremy Pruitt.
Home of the Happy